The morning fog clung to the small coastal town like a shroud, swallowing the narrow streets and pastel-coloured houses that had stood watch over the Atlantic for generations. In this town, where everyone knew each other's ancestors as well as they knew their own, secrets were hard to keep. Yet, the fog seemed to whisper of untold stories, of whispers that never quite reached the surface. Maggie Collins, owner of the Seaside Cafe, was an early riser. Her routine was as predictable as the tides, a brisk walk along the beach to clear her head before the demands of the day took hold. This morning, however, the dense fog made the familiar path feel alien, the muffled sound of the waves crashing against the shore, the only indication that the sea was still in its place. As she neared the abandoned lighthouse, a structure that had long ceased to guide ships, but still stood as a silent guardian of the town's history, Maggie's foot caught on something in the sand. Expecting a piece of driftwood or perhaps a lost item from a tourist, she bent down, her fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. Straightening, she saw it wasn't an object that had tripped her, but an indentation in the sand, an etching that seemed too deliberate to be the work of nature. The fog seemed to hold its breath as she traced the outline with her gaze, her heart quickening when she realized it formed a single word. Help. Pulse racing, Maggie followed the message's direction, leading her towards the base of the lighthouse. The fog grew denser, the world beyond a few feet lost to a grey void. Then, like a scene slowly coming into focus, she saw it. A figure lying motionless at the edge of the water, where the sea met the sand. Rushing forward, Maggie recognized the figure as Eli Thompson, the town's reclusive artist, known more for his mysterious past than his rare but striking exhibitions. He lay still, his eyes closed, as if in peaceful repose, but the unnatural angle of his body and the pallor of his skin spoke of a different, darker truth. For a moment Maggie stood frozen, the realization that Eli was dead sinking in. The town, with its sleepy demeanor and close-knit community, was unaccustomed to violence or tragedy of this kind. Shaking off her shock, Maggie pulled out her phone with trembling hands, her fingers numb as she dialed the emergency number. The call connected, and she spoke, her voice barely a whisper against the sound of the fog and the sea. "There's been a death at the lighthouse. It's Eli Thompson. Please hurry." As she waited for the authorities to arrive, Maggie looked around, the eerie silence of the fog-filled morning enveloping her. The message in the sand, Eli's lifeless form, the lighthouse looming overhead, all of it felt like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. The town, with its history of quiet days and peaceful nights, had changed in the span of a single morning. A secret lay buried in the fog, and Maggie knew that the calm her town had enjoyed was merely the surface of deeper, darker waters. The sound of sirens in the distance broke the silence, a stark reminder that the day was just beginning. As the first responders made their way through the fog towards her, Maggie couldn't shake the feeling that Eli's death was just the beginning. The town, with its layers of history and secrets, was about to have its quiet facade shattered, and Maggie, who had stumbled upon the first clue, found herself at the heart of a mystery that would engulf the entire community. As the police tape went up and the fog began to lift, revealing the quaint town in the light of day, Maggie watched, knowing that the peace of the morning had been an illusion. The real story was just beginning to unfold, and she, along with Detective Alex Mercer, who was soon to arrive, would be the ones to peel back the layers of secrecy that the fog had kept hidden for so long. Detective Alex Mercer arrived in the coastal town just as the afternoon sun began to break through the lingering fog, casting long shadows on the quaint streets that seemed to whisper of times long past. The town, picturesque and seemingly untouched by the rapid pace of the outside world, was the last place one would expect to find at the center of a crime investigation. Yet, as Mercer drove past the colourful storefronts and the locals who eyed his car with a mixture of curiosity and caution, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the task ahead. His destination was the Lighthouse, the scene of the crime, where the body of Eli Thompson had been discovered that morning. As he parked his car and made his way towards the cordoned-off area, he took in the details of the surroundings, the way the sand met the rocky base of the lighthouse, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, and the eerie silence that seemed to envelop the place. The local police force, small and evidently unaccustomed to dealing with incidents of this nature, greeted him with a mix of relief and apprehension. They briefed him on the situation. Eli Thompson, a local artist known for his reclusiveness, had been found dead that morning by Maggie Collins, a well-respected member of the community. The initial assumption had been an accident, or perhaps a tragic suicide, but the mysterious message found etched in the sand near the body suggested otherwise. Mercer knelt beside the imprint in the sand, now partially obscured by the movements of the officers and the changing tide. The word "help" was still discernible, a silent scream captured in the grains of sand. It was this detail, more than anything, that convinced him this was no simple accident. Someone had wanted Eli Thompson found, but whether it was a call for help from the victim himself or a taunting message from the perpetrator remained to be seen. He made his way to where Eli's body had been found. Though the scene had been disturbed, the layout of the land and the position of nearby objects gave him a rough idea of the events leading up to the discovery. The absence of any personal effects or signs of a struggle puzzled him. It was as if Eli had simply laid down at the base of the lighthouse and never got up again. As the local police shared their findings, Mercer listened intently, jotting down notes in his pad. They mentioned Eli's reputation as a talented but deeply private individual, someone who had few friends and rarely participated in town events. Yet, his artwork was celebrated, evocative pieces that often featured the sea and the lighthouse, imbued with a sense of melancholy and isolation that now seemed prescient. Mercer requested to speak with Maggie Collins, the woman who had found Eli. As he waited for her to arrive, he walked the perimeter of the scene, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. He noted the tire tracks on a nearby path, too fresh to have been left long before the body was found, and the slight disturbance in the sand that suggested someone had stood there for a while, watching or waiting. When Maggie arrived, Mercer observed her closely. Her demeanor was calm, but the sadness in her eyes spoke volumes. She recounted her discovery of the body, her voice steady, but tinged with the shock of the morning's events. As she spoke, Mercer noted the affection in her words for Eli, the way she described his art, and her insistence that he was not the type to seek out trouble. After thanking Maggie, Mercer stood looking out at the sea, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to form a picture in his mind, though the edges were still blurred. The message in the sand, the location of the body, Eli's reclusive nature, and the absence of any clear motive or suspect all pointed to a mystery that was deeply entwined with the town's history and its inhabitants. Determined to peel back the layers of this secluded community and uncover the truth, Mercer made his way back to his car. The investigation had only just begun, and he knew that the key to solving Eli Thompson's death lay not just in the physical evidence, but in understanding the undercurrents of the town itself. As he drove away, the lighthouse in his rearview mirror, a silent sentinel to the unfolding drama, Mercer felt the weight of the task ahead. He was no longer just an outsider. He was the catalyst that would bring hidden truths to light. The next morning, Detective Alex Mercer made his way to the Seaside Cafe, a charming establishment known for its warm ambience and stunning views of the ocean. The cafe, owned by Maggie Collins, had been recommended by the locals not just for its coffee, but as a hub of community life. Mercer recognized it as an ideal place to glean insights into Eli Thompson's life and the town's dynamics. Maggie greeted him with a reserved smile, the weariness of the previous day's events still evident in her eyes. She led him to a quiet corner table away from the gentle buzz of morning patrons. Over cups of freshly brewed coffee, Mercer began to peel away the layers of the town's serene facade, guided by Maggie's narrative. Maggie spoke of Eli with a fondness that belied a deep connection formed over years of shared experiences. Eli was more than just a reclusive artist, she began, her voice soft but clear. He was a part of this town, as much as any of us. His art captured the essence of our community, its beauty, its isolation, and, yes, its secrets. Mercer listened intently, absorbing every detail. Maggie described how Eli had arrived in the town nearly a decade ago, a man looking for refuge from a past he seldom spoke of. Over the years, he had become a fixture of the community, his artwork beloved by many, but understood by few. Eli saw things in a different light, Maggie explained. He had a way of looking beyond the surface, finding beauty in the forgotten and the overlooked. The conversation shifted to the day of the discovery. Maggie recounted her morning walk, the fog, the eerie sense of foreboding, and the chilling discovery at the lighthouse. It was as if the fog itself was hiding the truth, she said, a note of mysticism in her voice. Eli's death is a wound on the heart of this town. We're all connected, Detective. His secrets are our secrets. Mercer probed gently about the dynamics within the town, the relationships, and any conflicts Eli might have been involved in. Maggie hesitated, then spoke of the undercurrents of rivalry and resentment that occasionally surfaced within the small community. Eli was private, but he wasn't without his detractors. Some envied his talent, others were wary of his solitude. But to say he had enemies, that's hard to imagine here. As they spoke, Mercer noted the comings and goings of the cafe's patrons, the nods of recognition, the shared smiles, and the undercurrent of concern that seemed to ripple through the room. Maggie's position in the town afforded her a unique perspective, one that Mercer recognized as invaluable to his investigation. Before he left, Maggie handed him a small wrapped package. Eli left this with me a few days before he died, she said, her voice faltering for the first time. He asked me to keep it safe, but didn't explain why. I think you should have it. Back in his car, Mercer unwrapped the package to find a small leather-bound journal. The pages were filled with sketches, notes, and, most intriguingly, coded messages that seemed to hint at something more than just artistic inspiration. The journal was a window into Eli's mind, offering clues that could potentially lead to understanding his final days. As Mercer turned the car towards the police station, he felt the weight of the journal in his hands. It was a tangible connection to Eli, a piece of the puzzle that might hold the key to unraveling the mystery of his death. Maggie's insight had opened new avenues of investigation, revealing the depth of the bonds within the town and the complexity of the secrets it held. The detective knew that solving Eli's murder would require more than just forensic evidence. It would demand an understanding of the human connections and the hidden truths that lay at the heart of this close-knit community. With Maggie's words echoing in his mind, Mercer felt a renewed determination to bring closure to the town and justice for Eli Thompson. Detective Alex Mercer spent the morning poring over Eli Thompson's journal, deciphering the sketches and notes that the artist had left behind. Each page seemed to be a piece of a larger puzzle, with references to specific locations in the town and cryptic messages that hinted at Eli's inner thoughts and fears. It was a window into the soul of a man who viewed the world through a lens of beauty and complexity, yet also through one of caution and secrecy. Realizing the potential significance of Eli's artwork in solving the case, Mercer decided to visit Eli's studio, a small, secluded space on the outskirts of town where the artist had spent countless hours creating his pieces. The local police had already secured the studio as part of their initial investigation, but Mercer hoped a fresh set of eyes might uncover something they had missed. The studio was a reflection of Eli's mind, organized chaos with canvases strewn about, some finished, others half-started. Sketches and notes adorned the walls, and jars of paint and brushes were meticulously arranged on shelves. The detective was struck by the intensity of the artwork. The pieces were vibrant, yet haunting, each telling a story of its own. As Mercer examined the studio, he noticed a series of paintings that stood apart from the rest. These pieces were darker, more abstract, and seemed to be part of a series. Each painting featured the lighthouse, the beach, and the sea, but with a sense of foreboding that was hard to ignore. In the corner of each piece, barely visible, were symbols that matched some of the coded messages in Eli's journal. Connecting the symbols to the messages, Mercer began to unravel the code. The paintings weren't just expressions of Eli's artistic vision. They were a map, a guide to something Eli had discovered or feared. The detective meticulously documented each piece, photographing the symbols and their corresponding locations in the paintings. The breakthrough came when Mercer aligned the symbols with a map of the town. The points formed a pattern, leading to various locations that Eli had frequented or found significant. Among these was the abandoned lighthouse, the beach where his body had been found, and a secluded spot in the woods, known only to the locals as the clearing. Determined to follow Eli's trail, Mercer set out to visit each location, starting with the clearing. It was a place of natural beauty, untouched by the town's development, and held a sense of serenity that contrasted with the turmoil of the investigation. Yet, as Mercer explored the area, he found a buried canvas, hidden away as if meant to be discovered only by those who knew where to look. The painting was unlike any of Eli's other works. It was a portrait, but the face was obscured, replaced by a question mark. Surrounding the figure were the same symbols from the journal and the other paintings, but here they were arranged in a circle, pointing inward. Mercer realized that the portrait represented someone, a key figure in Eli's life, or perhaps in his death. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the clearing, Mercer felt a chill that had little to do with the evening air. Eli's art had indeed held secrets, but they were deeper and more personal than anyone had realized. The artist had been trying to communicate something urgent, something that now lay at the very heart of the mystery. Returning to town, Mercer knew that the next phase of the investigation would involve delving into Eli's relationships and the identities of those who might be represented in the final, hidden painting. The artwork was not just a collection of images. It was a narrative, one that Eli had desperately been trying to tell. The detective's resolve hardened as he considered the implications of his discoveries. Eli Thompson's art was a testament to his talent, but it was also a map to understanding his fate. Mercer was determined to follow where it led, to uncover the secrets that the artist had left behind, and to bring to light the truth of what had happened in the shadows of this seemingly tranquil town. The discovery of the hidden painting in the clearing had opened a new avenue of investigation for Detective Alex Mercer. It suggested that Eli Thompson's death was deeply entwined with his personal connections, and perhaps a secret that someone in the town was desperate to keep buried. With this in mind, Mercer decided it was time to delve deeper into Eli's past and the people he was closest to. The first person on his list was Sarah Jennings, Eli's closest friend, and a key figure in the town's art scene. Sarah lived in a modest, ivy-covered house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by gardens that were as wild and untamed as some of the rumors that swirled around her friendship with Eli. Mercer found her tending to a bed of vibrant flowers, her hands covered in soil, a stark contrast to the delicate artwork she was known for. Introducing himself, Mercer was struck by Sarah's calm demeanor and the sadness that lingered in her eyes. She invited him inside, where the walls were adorned with her own paintings, bright and hopeful, a stark contrast to Eli's darker themes. Over cups of tea in a sunlit kitchen, Sarah began to share her memories of Eli, painting a picture of a man who was both deeply sensitive and profoundly isolated by his own genius. Eli was haunted, she confided, her voice barely above a whisper. Not by ghosts or anything like that, but by his past. He came here to escape it, to find peace in his art. But some things you can't just paint over or leave behind. Mercer listened, piecing together the fragmented image of Eli that was starting to form. He asked about the hidden painting and the symbols that seemed to connect so many of Eli's pieces. Sarah hesitated, a shadow crossing her face. Eli believed in signs, in messages hidden in plain sight. He was trying to tell us something important. But he was scared, Detective. There was something or someone he was trying to warn us about. It was then that Sarah revealed something Mercer hadn't expected. Before his death, Eli had become increasingly paranoid, believing that his studio had been broken into, that he was being watched. He had even started working on a new series of paintings, ones he kept hidden from everyone, including Sarah. He said he was working on his masterpiece, something that would change everything, but he never got to finish it. Mercer pressed for details, for anything that might help him understand the motive behind Eli's fear and ultimately his murder. Sarah mentioned a few names, people Eli had had disagreements with in the past, but nothing that seemed to warrant such fear. Then, almost as an afterthought, she mentioned a series of letters that Eli had received, letters he had burnt, but which had clearly shaken him. As Mercer left Sarah's house, his mind was racing. The letters were a new lead, one that could potentially unveil the threat Eli had felt looming over him. But more than that, Sarah's words had underscored the complexity of Eli's life and the depth of his connections within the town. It was becoming increasingly clear that Eli's art was not just a reflection of his talent, but a coded diary of his fears, relationships, and possibly the identity of his killer. The detective knew that solving this case would require unraveling the secrets Eli had hidden in his artwork and his past. It would mean listening to the voices from Eli's life, those who loved him, and those who might have wished him harm. Mercer was determined to give voice to Eli's silent messages, to piece together the puzzle of his death, and to bring closure to a town haunted by the loss of one of its own. As he drove back to the police station, the detective felt a renewed sense of purpose. Eli's voice, though silenced in death, was beginning to speak louder than ever through the legacy of his art and the memories of those who had known him best. Armed with new insights from his conversation with Sarah Jennings, Detective Alex Mercer set his sights on the abandoned lighthouse, the silent witness to Eli Thompson's final moments and a recurring motif in his artwork. The lighthouse, standing solitary against the backdrop of the sea, had long been a source of local lore and mystery, but now it held a more ominous significance. The day was overcast, with clouds hanging low, mirroring the somber mood of the investigation. As Mercer approached the lighthouse, he couldn't shake the feeling that the key to unraveling Eli's death lay within its shadowed walls. The lighthouse had been a beacon for Eli, both literally in his art and metaphorically, perhaps, as a guide through his own troubled thoughts. The detective made his way inside, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The interior was as he expected, abandoned and in disrepair, with layers of dust covering the old machinery and stairs winding up to the light chamber. But it was the ground floor that held Mercer's interest. This was where Eli's body had been found, and where the cryptic message in the sand had pointed. A thorough search revealed little at first glance, no obvious signs of a struggle or clues left behind. But Mercer, recalling the symbols and hidden messages in Eli's paintings, began to examine the walls more closely. It wasn't long before he found something, faint markings, almost imperceptible, etched into the stone wall. They were symbols, similar to those in Eli's journal and artwork, hidden in plain sight. Mercer documented the symbols meticulously, comparing them to the notes he had taken from Eli's journal, It was a cipher of sorts, a message left by Eli for someone who knew how to read it. The detective's determination grew. He was convinced that these symbols were a map, guiding him through Eli's fears and obsessions, leading him to the heart of the mystery. As he followed the trail of symbols, Mercer's investigation took him deeper into the lighthouse. Each mark, each coded message, seemed to pull the pieces of the puzzle closer together, weaving a narrative of paranoia, secrets, and a desperate cry for help. The climax of his search came in the light chamber at the top of the lighthouse. Here, amidst the rusted remains of the beacon machinery, was Eli's masterpiece. The painting Sarah had mentioned. Unfinished but unmistakably powerful, it depicted the lighthouse itself, surrounded by tumultuous seas and stormy skies. But it was the figures in the painting that caught Mercer's attention. Shadowy, indistinct shapes that seemed to encircle the lighthouse, menacing and oppressive. Mercer realized that this painting was more than just a piece of art. It was Eli's confession, his testament. The figures represented the threats Eli felt closing in on him, real or imagined, and the lighthouse, the beacon of safety, was also his prison, a place from which he could not escape his fears. The detective left the lighthouse as the day began to fade into evening, the weight of his discoveries heavy on his mind. Eli's art had indeed been a window into his soul, but it was also a mirror reflecting the darker undercurrents of the town itself. Mercer knew that to solve the mystery of Eli's death, he would need to confront not just the physical evidence, but the shadows that lay under the lighthouse's gaze. Shadows that had now stretched to envelop him in their grip. As he made his way back to the police station, Mercer was more determined than ever. The lighthouse, with its hidden messages and haunting final masterpiece, had provided crucial clues. Now it was up to him to piece them together, to step out from under the lighthouse's shadow and bring the truth into the light. With the revelations from the lighthouse looming large in his mind, Detective Alex Mercer decided it was time to explore the political undercurrents of the town. And at the center of these was Mayor Helen Baxter. Known for her charismatic leadership and decisive nature, Mayor Baxter had been at the helm of the town's affairs for over a decade. Under her stewardship, the town had seen significant development and prosperity, but not without its share of controversies and dissent. And Mercer arranged a meeting with the mayor at the town hall, a stately building that stood as a testament to the town's rich history and ambition for the future. The detective was ushered into a spacious office, where Mayor Baxter greeted him with a courteous, if somewhat guarded, smile. The conversation began with pleasantries, and Mercer explaining the progress of his investigation. However, as he steered the discussion towards Eli Thompson and the lighthouse, he noticed a subtle shift in the mayor's demeanor. Her responses became more measured, her gaze calculating. Mercer laid out the discoveries made at the lighthouse and Eli's studio, carefully watching for any reaction. When he mentioned the hidden messages and the symbols, Mayor Baxter's interest was visibly piqued. Eli was a talented artist, but also a troubled soul, she remarked, her tone laced with a hint of dismissiveness that Mercer found curious. Pressing further, Mercer asked about the town's plans for the lighthouse and the surrounding area, given its dilapidated state and the recent tragic events. The mayor's response was swift and firm. The lighthouse is part of our heritage, but it's also a safety hazard. We've been planning a renovation project to preserve it and boost tourism, she explained, outlining a vision for the future that seemed well-intentioned, but possibly at odds with Eli's attachment to the place as it was. It was then that Mercer took a more direct approach, inquiring about any opposition to the renovation plans or disputes that Eli might have had with the town's administration. Mayor Baxter paused, her expression turning contemplative. Eli had his opinions, as do all artists. He was vocal about preserving the natural beauty of the area, sometimes in opposition to development plans. But to suggest that had anything to do with his death Mercer noted the careful phrasing, the way the mayor navigated the question without outright denial. The detective sensed there was more to the story, layers of political maneuvering and personal agendas that Eli's death had inadvertently exposed. Before leaving, Mercer asked one final question, about the letters Sarah Jennings had mentioned Eli received. The mayor's reaction was the most telling yet, a brief flicker of concern, quickly masked. "I'm not aware of any threats to Eli, Detective. If such letters exist, they were not brought to my attention." As Mercer left the town hall, he couldn't help but feel that Mayor Baxter was a central figure in the web of secrets that enveloped the town. Her plans for the lighthouse, her reactions to his questions, and the unspoken tension surrounding Eli's opposition, painted a complex picture of political interests and personal vendettas. The detective knew that the path to solving Eli's murder was not just through the evidence he could see, but through understanding the motives and pressures exerted by those in power. Mayor Baxter, with her ambitions for the town and her influence over its residents, was now a person of interest in more ways than one. As he walked back to his car, Mercer mulled over the mayor's words and what lay unsaid. The investigation had taken a turn into the murky waters of politics, where the truth was often obscured by ambition and legacy. To find justice for Eli, Mercer would need to navigate these waters carefully, aware that the next revelation could come from the most unexpected of places. Detective Alex Mercer had felt the undercurrents of tension in the town since his arrival. But as dusk settled on the eve of his meeting with Mayor Baxter, those tensions seemed to crystallize into something tangible. The pieces of the puzzle, Eli's art, the hidden messages, the lighthouse, and now the political aspirations of the mayor, were beginning to form a coherent picture, yet key pieces remained elusive. Determined to push forward, Mercer decided to revisit the clearing under the cover of night. Something about Sarah Jennings's description of Eli's last days and his secretive masterpiece led Mercer to believe that the answers he sought might reveal themselves away from the prying eyes of the town. Armed with a flashlight and the resolve to uncover the truth, Mercer stepped into the night, the air thick with the scent of the sea and pine. As he navigated the familiar path to the clearing, Mercer's mind raced with possibilities. The sense of being watched, which Eli had reportedly felt in his final days, now seemed to envelop Mercer as well. The detective couldn't shake the feeling that the solution to the mystery lay just out of reach, hidden within the shadows that danced at the edge of his flashlight's beam. Arriving at the clearing, Mercer was struck by the eerie calm that pervaded the space. The moon, barely visible through the clouds, cast a pale light over the scene, lending an otherworldly quality to the landscape. It was here, amid the silence, that Mercer's attention was drawn to a subtle discrepancy in the terrain, a patch of earth that appeared to have been recently disturbed. Kneeling down, Mercer began to carefully excavate the area, his hands working through the soil until they made contact with a solid object. It was a box, crudely fashioned from wood, but carefully buried. Inside, Mercer found a collection of letters, their contents a revelation that would cast the events leading to Eli's death in a starkly new light. The letters were from various town residents, including some from Mayor Baxter herself. They detailed a complex web of relationships, grudges, and secrets that Eli had become entangled in. Most shockingly, they contained veiled threats and warnings directed at Eli, urging him to abandon his opposition to the Lighthouse renovation project and his efforts to expose a scandal that threatened to engulf the town's leadership. As Mercer sifted through the letters, the pieces of the puzzle snapped into place. Eli's art, his paranoia, the secretive masterpiece, all were manifestations of a man pushed to the brink by the knowledge he possessed and the threats he faced. The lighthouse, with its hidden messages, was not just a beacon in his art, but a symbol of the truth Eli was desperately trying to illuminate. With the evidence in hand, Mercer realized the full extent of the conspiracy that had silenced Eli Thompson. The artist had uncovered something that threatened to undermine the town's facade of tranquility and prosperity, a secret that someone was willing to kill to keep buried. The night's revelations left Mercer with a profound sense of urgency. It was no longer just a matter of solving a murder. It was about exposing the corruption that had taken root in the heart of the community. As he made his way back to town, the detective knew that the coming days would bring the confrontation he had been preparing for since his arrival. The truth about Eli's death was now within reach, but Mercer was acutely aware that unveiling it would shatter the peace of the town forever. The detective steeled himself for the challenges ahead, knowing that the path to justice for Eli Thompson would lead him through the darkest corners of the human heart. The revelations uncovered in The Clearing propelled Detective Alex Mercer into action with a newfound determination. The letters, a tangible link to the motives behind Eli Thompson's murder, were a damning indictment of the lengths to which individuals in the town were willing to go to protect their secrets and ambitions. As dawn broke, casting a soft light over the town, Mercer prepared to confront those implicated by the evidence. The first rays of sunlight seemed to dispel the shadows of the night, but the detective knew that the real darkness lay in the actions and decisions of the town's residents. With the letters secured and his notes meticulously organized, Mercer called a meeting with the local police force. Presenting his findings, he outlined the network of threats and coercion that Eli had faced, painting a picture of a community ensnared by its own web of lies. The evidence pointed unmistakably to a conspiracy involving key figures in the town, including those in positions of power and influence. The local police, initially skeptical, were soon convinced by the weight of the evidence. A plan was quickly devised to bring those responsible to justice, starting with the arrest of the primary suspects. Mercer, leading the operation, felt a sense of grim satisfaction as the pieces fell into place. The town's facade of tranquility was about to be shattered, but in its place, the hope for truth and reconciliation could begin to take root. The arrests sent shockwaves through the community. Mayor Helen Baxter, along with several other prominent figures, were taken into custody, their roles in the conspiracy laid bare. The news spread like wildfire, igniting a storm of emotions among the town's residents, anger, disbelief, but also relief that the truth was finally emerging. In the days that followed, Mercer worked tirelessly to piece together the case for prosecution. The evidence was overwhelming, painting a picture of a conspiracy that had silenced Eli Thompson to prevent the exposure of corruption at the heart of the town's redevelopment plans. The trial, when it came, was a cathartic moment for the community, a chance to confront the sins of the past and start the process of healing. As the guilty were convicted and sentenced, Mercer found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. The case had tested him in ways he had never anticipated, challenging his perceptions of justice and the role of a detective in seeking the truth. Eli's art, once a source of mystery and intrigue, had become a beacon of light, guiding Mercer through the darkness. In the aftermath of the trial, the town began the slow process of recovery. The Lighthouse, the silent witness to so much of the story, became a symbol of the town's resilience and determination to move forward. Plans for its renovation were revisited, this time with a focus on preserving its history and significance as a reminder of the past. Detective Alex Mercer, having seen the case through to its conclusion, prepared to leave the town behind. His work there was done, but the memories of the case and of Eli Thompson's tragic fate would stay with him. As he drove away, the town fading into the distance, Mercer felt a sense of closure, not just for himself, but for the community that had been forced to confront its darkest secrets. The echo of Eli's life, captured in his art, and now in the legacy of the case, would resonate for years to come, a reminder of the cost of silence and the value of truth. Mercer had come to the town as an outsider, but he left knowing that his efforts had helped to mend a community torn apart by secrets and lies. The echoes of the past were resolved, but their lessons would endure, a testament to the strength found in facing the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The days following the trial felt like a collective exhale for the small coastal town. With the guilty parties held accountable and the truth laid bare, the town found itself at a crossroads, facing the daunting task of rebuilding trust and community spirit in the wake of such profound betrayal. Detective Alex Mercer, having stayed on to see the final sentences delivered, took one last walk through the town. The streets, once shadowed with suspicion and fear, now basked in the soft light of a new beginning. Conversations that had once been hushed were now open and filled with the possibility of change. The town was healing, slowly stitching itself back together with the threads of shared resolve and newfound transparency. As he made his way to the lighthouse, the symbol of so much turmoil and, ultimately, revelation, Mercer reflected on the transformation he had witnessed. The lighthouse stood tall against the sky, its structure no longer a looming reminder of Eli Thompson's untimely death, but a beacon of hope and resilience. The plans for its renovation had been revised, incorporating a memorial for Eli and a gallery to showcase his art, ensuring that his legacy would be remembered, not for the mystery of his death, but for the beauty and truth he sought to capture in his work. Standing at the base of the lighthouse, Mercer looked out at the sea, its vastness a mirror to the depth of the human heart, with all its capacity for darkness and light. The waves crashed against the shore, a rhythmic reminder that life, with all its trials and tribulations, goes on. In the distance, Maggie Collins and Sarah Jennings stood together, their figures silhouetted against the horizon. They had been instrumental in uncovering the truth, their courage and loyalty to Eli, a testament to the bonds that held the community together. As they noticed Mercer, they waved, a gesture of gratitude and acknowledgement of the journey they had all undertaken. Mercer raised his hand in response, feeling a sense of completion. His job here was done. The case that had brought him to this town had been resolved, but the lessons learned and the relationships forged would stay with him. He had come to solve a murder, but in the process, he had witnessed the strength of a community coming together to reclaim its integrity and honor the memory of one of its own. Turning away from the lighthouse, Mercer made his way back to his car, pausing to take one last look at the town. The fog that had once shrouded the streets in mystery had lifted, leaving in its wake a clarity and a promise of renewal. The truth had indeed come at a cost, but it had also paved the way for healing and growth. As he drove away, the town receding in his rearview mirror, Mercer felt a profound sense of peace. The case of Eli Thompson would always be a part of him, a reminder of the complexities of human nature and the enduring quest for justice. But it was time to move on, to carry the lessons of this town to the next case, the next challenge. The fog had cleared, not just over the town but within Mercer himself. He had seen the worst of what people could do, but he had also seen the best. In the end, it was the light of truth, shining through the darkest of circumstances, that would guide the way forward.